You checked your balance this morning. Maybe you felt relief. Maybe you felt dread. Either way, you felt something. Something deep and physical, like a pulse in your chest. And here is the strange part. The number you saw was not real. It never was. But your brain does not know that. Money is the greatest trick the human mind ever played on itself. And once you understand how it started, you will never look at your wallet, your paycheck, or your anxiety the same way again. Go back 5,000 years, not to banks or coins or paper, to a man standing outside a mud brick building in ancient Sumer, holding a lump of clay. He presses a reed into the soft surface, once, twice, 3 times. He is not writing poetry, he is recording a debt. 3 jars of barley owed. That little tablet, drying in the sun, is the oldest known financial record on Earth. And the moment that reed touched clay, something inside the human brain began to change. Before that moment, trade was simple. You had grain, your neighbor had goats. You exchanged. No middle step, no abstraction, just things for things. Economists call this barter, and for a long time, people assumed it was how all ancient economies worked. But anthropologist David Graeber spent years tearing that assumption apart. In his landmark work, Debt, the First 5,000 Years, Graeber argued that barter economies almost never existed. Not really. What actually came first was credit, trust, the promise to repay. Before coins, before currency, humans were already running on I owe us. Think about what that means. The very first financial system was not about objects. It was about relationships, about memory, about the social obligation to make things right. Money, in other words, did not evolve from trade. It evolved from trust. But trust has a problem. It does not scale. You can trust your neighbor. You can trust the 10 families in your village. But what happens when your village becomes a city? When your city becomes a kingdom, you cannot personally know everyone who owes you. You cannot hold every debt in your memory. You need a symbol, something portable, something everyone agrees to believe in. That is where the first coins enter the story. Around 600 BCE, in the ancient kingdom of Lydia, roughly where Western Turkey sits today, someone stamped a small electrum nugget with the face of a lion. Electrum is a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. The stamp was not decorative. It was a guarantee. It said, "This piece of metal has been weighed and verified by the king." You can trust it. You do not need to trust the stranger handing it to you. You only need to trust the symbol. That one idea, that an object could carry trust inside it, rewired the ancient world. Trade exploded. Kingdoms grew. Armies got paid. And for the first time in human history, a person could walk into a city where no one knew their name and still exchange value. Anonymity plus trust. That combination had never existed before. But here is where it gets strange. Here is where your brain enters the story. Your brain did not evolve with coins. It did not evolve with credit scores or mortgages or stock prices. It evolved on the savannah 50,000 years ago, scanning for threats and opportunities. And the part of your brain that evaluates threats, the amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in your temporal lobe, cannot tell the difference between a lion in the grass and a notification that your rent is overdue. Neuroscientist Morten Kringelbach has spent decades mapping how the brain responds to financial gain and loss. What he found is unsettling. Losing money activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Gaining money lights up the same circuits as eating food when you are starving. Your brain does not process money as an abstract system. It processes it as survival. Every dollar you lose feels somewhere below conscious thought, like a bite taken out of your body. That is why you feel it. That is why checking your balance is never emotionally neutral. Your ancient brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, except the threat is a number on a screen, and the predator is your credit card company. Now ask yourself this. If money is a collective belief, if it is only worth something because enough people agree it is, what happens when that agreement breaks? History gives you the answer, and it is terrifying. In 1923, Germany was drowning in war debt. The government started printing money to pay its obligations. At first it worked, then it collapsed. Within months, inflation spiraled so fast that workers were paid twice a day so they could spend their wages before the money lost its value. People burned banknotes for heat because the paper was worth more as fuel than as currency. The number on the bill was real. The value was not. The collective agreement had shattered. This was not a failure of math. It was a failure of belief. Money had always been a story. And when enough people stopped believing the story at the same time, the story ended. But here is the counterintuitive twist that most people never see. That fragility, that total dependence on collective belief is also money's greatest superpower. Because belief scales infinitely. Gold is scarce, land is limited. But belief can expand without limit. That is what allows a modern economy to exist. That is what allows a country to build a highway, fund a hospital, or send a satellite into orbit. Not gold, not grain. Belief formalized into a system. The Swedish economist Knut Wicksell wrote about this more than a century ago. He argued that money was less a commodity and more a unit of social memory, a shared record of who had contributed and who was owed. What he was describing, though he did not use these words, was the clay tablet in Sumer. The reed mark in the mud, the original ledger. Nothing has changed. Your bank account is a clay tablet. Your credit score is a reed mark. The system is 5,000 years old and your brain is still reacting to it like a predator in the grass. So what do you do with that knowledge? You start by understanding the difference between the number and the reality. The number in your account is a symbol inside a shared story. The reality is what you can build, create, trade, and give to the people around you. Every civilization that ever collapsed put too much faith in the symbol and forgot the reality underneath it. You are not immune to that collapse. None of us are. But you are also not powerless. Every time you make a conscious financial decision, every time you ask what this number actually represents, what real thing it connects to, what real relationship it reflects, you are doing something your ancient brain was never designed to do. You are stepping outside the story long enough to see it as a story. That is not easy. It took 5,000 years and the entire architecture of human civilization to get you to this moment. But here you are, looking at the number on your screen and finally asking the right question. Not how much do I have, but what does the symbol actually mean? This morning, when you checked your balance and felt that pulse in your chest, you were not reacting to money. You were reacting to 5,000 years of accumulated human belief, encoded in a clay tablet, hammered into a coin, printed on a bill, and finally compressed into a glowing rectangle in your hand. The number was never really the point. The trust behind it always was.